Not long ago, I was playing bass with a band for the first time in a long time. We were in the midst of writing a song. I was working on a bass part, and I just couldn't get the sound I wanted out of my instrument. I kept fiddling around with knobs and changing settings on the amplifier, but nothing was really working. I went home that day racking my brain on what to do, and then I remembered a time I had felt this way before, a time where I just couldn't get my bass to sound the way I wanted it to. Almost 9 years ago at this point, before I got this, the bass I was using, and the only one I had used for the past 9 years. Yeah, before I got this bass, it was the same way. I was doing everything right, but it just didn't sound like I wanted it to. Was it time again, after all these years, for a new instrument? It was, I finally decided. Despite the fact that I was keeping my old bass, and I would still be able to play it whenever I wanted, it felt like the end of an era. I loved that thing, and it took me so far. That bass was the greatest gift I ever received, and it changed my life. So I want to tell you about it. This is my Fender Precision Bass. It was manufactured in Mexico in the year 2000 with a poplar body, 34-inch maple neck, rosewood fretboard, and a midnight wine polyester finish. In the neck position, it has an EMG GZRP, and in the bridge position, it has an EMG SJA. It has dents on the neck and around the nut, and a scrape at the top of the headstock. That's a lot of info, and most of it's unimportant. But what is important, I will explain in a bit. In the late 1940s or early 1950s, a man by the name of Leo Fender began working on a new creation. A few years prior, he had released his Fender Esquire, the world's first modern electric guitar. His first new idea was to give the same treatment to a bass. The double bass was a large, difficult-to-move instrument that was prone to creating a lot of unwanted noise when it was amplified, which was happening more and more as rock and roll grew as a genre. Mr. Fender and his associate George Fullerton worked through a few designs, and eventually they released this. They called it the Precision Bass due to the precise intonation enabled by the fretted neck, as opposed to the fretless necks of upright basses. Since its release in 1950, Fender hasn't stopped building the Precision, and it has remained one of the most popular basses to this day. In 2019, I had lost a bit of interest in the bass. I felt like I plateaued and it wasn't fulfilling to practice anymore. Then, lockdown began, and suddenly I found myself with a lot of free time, and a lot of emotions that I didn't really know what to do with. So I picked up the bass again. One summer evening, I pulled out the P-bass and I started playing. I came up with a slow, funky little bass line that I liked. On a whim, I decided to record it. I got on the computer and came up with a piano part to go with the bass line, and then a guitar part, and then some drums. Eventually, I noticed that the sun was beginning to go up outside. I had spent the night writing an entire lo-fi hip-hop song. I woke up the next morning excited to work on it more, and I did. And then I finished it, and then I published it. I kept writing and recording lo-fi songs throughout the pandemic. They were a major way I stayed sane during those difficult times, and it was all initiated by my bass. Every time I wanted to start a new song, I would noodle away on that thing until I came up with a bass line that I liked. It got to the point where I was waking up in the middle of the night and picking up the bass to record something I thought of in a dream. It sounds a bit silly, but I would call my bass one of the main characters in that phase of my life. The Precision Bass was slow to catch on in the early years. The first professional musician to start using the P-bass in concert was Roy Johnson, the bassist for Lionel Hampton's big band. Johnson was soon replaced by Monk Montgomery, who also used the new electric bass. Some were impressed by this new instrument, and some were critical, saying that there was no reason to ever play an electric bass. Early adopters came out on top, though. As rock and roll became more and more popular, and music became louder, the electric bass took off, and the P-bass cemented itself as the default option. Over the years, a lot of important bassists have played the Precision Bass in various iterations. Some names you may recognize are Roger Waters of Pink Floyd. Or how about John Entwistle of The Who? Sting, the bassist for The Police. There's this guy, or this guy, or this gal, or her, or him, or him, or him, or him. Do you get the point? Even if you don't know it, you've heard a P-bass. It's kind of impossible to listen to music made in the past 70 years or so without hearing one. When I was about 15 or 16, I joined my first quote-unquote real band. It was a metal group called Fate's Rain. I was really excited to finally be working on music with other people, and I'd been getting into metal recently, so it was perfect. But there was one thing bugging me. There weren't many bassists, especially in modern metal, playing Fender Precision basses. Would I be able to get a good sound? I brought this up with my dad, and he suggested that I get new pickups. When you look at this, and this, you'll probably notice some differences. This is the original Precision bass, this is the second iteration, and this is a newer option, usually called a PJ. They'll have some basic cosmetic differences, the finish, the pick guard, the knob placement, but the real changes are here. These are called pickups, and they're what turns the strings vibrating into an electrical signal which gets turned into sound at the amplifier. There are hundreds of configurations of pickup, and they're really important to the way a bass or any electric instrument sounds. The first precision basses ever made had these, but they had some problems that were exposed in the first few years after the bass was released. To remedy those problems, Leo Fender invented a new configuration and shipped it out starting with the 1957 model of the instrument. It looks like this. This pickup is what has become iconic on the P-Bass. Some people will swear by the original design, but for the most part, if you see a P-Bass in the wild, it probably has one of these. Fender was pretty sure that this was just about perfect, and didn't make any changes after 1957. In Japan, however, there was still experimentation happening. What if we move the pickup around, or how does it sound if we add another? Eventually the style was a hit which kept the standard pickup, but added another to complement the sound. This PJ configuration got popular in the 70s and 80s, and it's what my bass would eventually become. I searched around the internet for a few days, looking through forums, Reddit threads, YouTube videos, and product descriptions, and one option kept standing out: the EMG GZR. Now this group of seemingly random letters actually has some meaning. EMG is the brand which has a long and storied history with metal musicians. The GZR is a shortening of the name Geezer, as in Geezer Butler, the bassist for Black Sabbath. Geezer Butler is arguably the first metal bassist, and he definitely inspired me. These pickups were built to emulate his growling tone from early Black Sabbath records. I got the pickups and I had them installed. Once I started playing, I was sold. This was that growly, punchy metal sound that I wanted. It was cool to have new pickups, and the new sound was great. But looking back, I think this moment was much more significant than that. When I put a new pickup in it, that bass changed in my mind from a P-Bass to my P-Bass. I had basses before, but they just felt to me like whatever instrument I was currently using. This was different. This P-Bass in my mind had become something special, something recognizably mine. This was the turning point. I went on to make other changes, and now you can tell just from looking that this instrument is distinctly mine. I can confidently say that there is no other bass like it. But as I've realized, it doesn't really matter. This bass would be mine regardless if I had done any modifications to it. What I played on it, what it looked like, those things will be forgotten. But the way it made me feel, the way it's made others feel through my playing, those will live on. When Leo Fender introduced the Precision Bass, it retailed for $199.50. That's $2,373.68 in today's money. Right now, I could get a new American Vintage 2 1954 Precision Bass, Fender's modern recreation of the original instrument, for $2,449.99. Really, the price for premier top-of-the-line P-Bass hasn't changed that much over the years. What has changed, though, is the presence of more and more affordable models. Fender's cheapest new P-Bass is $999.99. On the secondary market, you can find Fender basses for as low as $450. Other brands sell P-Bass equivalents for as low as $80. When Leo Fender was asked who his new invention was for in 1951, he answered, anyone with the necessary $199.50. Today, I'm sure the answer would be the same, but with a far, far lower price for entry. The P-Bass is for anyone with the money to get one, and now that price is lower than ever. Music is accessible to everyone, and everyone can have their opportunity to make their story with an instrument. There was a summer afternoon. It was around my birthday, and I was about to turn 13. I was playing video games, and my dad asked me to come talk to him when I got the chance. I got up and followed him to the music room where there was a big box, roughly the right size for a bass. I wasn't expecting anything big, so I assumed he may have bought me a case or something. He had me open it, and inside was a beautiful dark red Fender Precision Bass. I was excited, of course. I was also in disbelief, caught off guard. I took out the instrument and looked it over, still not quite sure what was going on. I remember asking why. I felt like I didn't deserve something this nice. My dad explained that I had been practicing a lot recently and getting into different types of music, so he felt I should be playing a nicer instrument that matched the music I liked. I was still in disbelief as I looked the bass up and down. He continued to explain that he had bought the bass from a pawn shop, got a good deal on it. He quoted the legend B.B. King. If a guitar hasn't been in the pawn shop, then it can't play the blues. He explained that an instrument that's been in a pawn shop has character. It's got a history you'll never know, and it's got the marks to show it. At some point, whoever owned it decided they wanted to get rid of it. Maybe they needed the money, or maybe they just didn't want it anymore. Now it's yours, but it will always have that history. I didn't really get all the implications of this at the time. I just wanted to get to playing. So I did. If a guitar hasn't been in a pawn shop, then it can't play the blues. I still think about that quote a lot. There's a lot of unique stuff about my bass. It's got black hardware and a strange pickup configuration, and it looks like a metalhead has definitely had his hands on it. But none of that really mattered, it was all auxiliary. My bass has a history. Before I had it, things happened to it. They left their mark, and now I've left mine. Once I finally let this bass go, probably not during my lifetime, whoever gets it will leave their mark too. Every P-bass, every instrument has a story. This one, and this one, and this one, and this one, they all have a story just as beautiful and meaningful as mine. If they don't yet, they're waiting for the right person to pick them up and write one. The people who own these instruments use them, and love them, and hate them, and hurt them, and heal them, and they make them their own. From the ancient, worn-out, pock-marked upright to the 2024 Dingwall combustion, all of these instruments have their person, their version of me. I hope every instrument will be remembered as fondly as I remember my bass, because they all deserve it. There's really no such thing as just a P-bass. All that exists in those hundreds of thousands that have been built are P-basses that have been loved and P-basses that haven't been loved yet.